Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today we have 3 news stories for you. The first is about a restaurant visitor from France. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story. The tip is not right? Very well, let me correct it. Some short backstory here. I'm French, and I've been living in the US for a few months already at the time of this story. I was pretty much aware of the tipping policy in restaurants, and I would always tip at least 15% no matter how horrible the service was. So that day, I was going with 20 or so colleagues to an open bar event for my company in order to celebrate the visit of a colleague to our US office. This having been planned at the last minute and the ordinary place being already booked, we chose to book instead at a restaurant that I did not know, but had somewhat decent reviews on Google and seemed very nice from the outside. The least I can say is that the service was subpar. The wait times were extremely long, the room we were placed in was isolated from the main area, so we basically had to go to the other area to call a waiter when we needed something. The drinks were on the cheap side with extremely stingy servings on the cheapest alcohol you could imagine, and one server in particular was very lazy and rude. I'll skip the details, but it was not the best experience, and we chose never to come to this restaurant again. Comes the check for a little over $1,000. I'll be the one paying with my personal card and filing the paperwork the next day to be refunded by my company. Given the experience, the tip was set to the customary 15%, which I find generous in this specific case. I put the numbers and signed the slip, all done. Or so I hoped. As we prepare to leave, the rude waiter approaches me and starts to school me on how 15% is disrespectful and how strangers like me should learn how to behave in the country, adding with a disrespectful tone that the French were as cheapskate as she thought. Needless to say, everybody could hear her ranting and was a bit speechless. What I never thought to be possible happened. She outright asked me to update the tip to a more adequate level of tipping for the service provided. Very well. I will definitely comply with the request. I politely apologize and ask for the receipt to correct it, which I do, changing my 15% to 0%. I take a picture of the receipt for my company paperwork. I then give her back the paper, apologizing that my initial tip was obviously not adequate for the service provided. She was on the verge of exploding at this point. We leave. Although she was still loudly ranting at this point, I did not pay attention and we did leave. End of story. Or so I thought. A few days later, on a Saturday, I noticed on my credit card account online that I was charged a 25% tip on top of the check, which was initially just an exceptionally bad experience changed into an outright fraud. First thing first, I do immediately go to my bank in person to dispute the charge as unauthorized and provide the banker with the picture of the receipt and the 0% tip. He does write some of the story on his computer. On Monday, I go first thing to the restaurant to talk to a manager. This went uneventful, with the manager siding with her waiter, but nonetheless telling me that he will look into the issue and call me back later. I insisted, but he was extremely rude also, and did not want to move a finger or believe me, keeping saying that they are not in the business of credit card fraud, and adding that I should have came to them before filing a chargeback. I left eventually. 1 week later, I do receive a call from my banker informing me that the restaurant has agreed to the chargeback and that the whole transaction has been reversed. I did expect only the tip to be refunded, resulting in the credit on my account being permanent. The next day, I do receive a call from the restaurant owner directly, which was particularly apologetic. It seems that the waiter was new, but that similar incidents occurred since she has been hired. He kindly asked me if I could come back to the restaurant to receive a formal apology, which I agreed to do the next day. On that day, when I arrived, the manager did inform me that they did fire on the spot the waitress once the fraud was proven. He also did call the manager who received me the first day and asked him to apologize as well, which he reluctantly did. Finally, the owner told me that my next meal there would be on the house. I will probably not eat there again given the food quality, but nonetheless, thank him for his honesty and for not fighting the chargeback. End of story. For real that time. Big plus to the owner doing the right thing, though. For that, I would probably go back on a different night and see if the food improves. For all you know, the kitchen may have just had a bad night or something, and you know that at least the top of management are good people. And our second story. You want the designs of a project to be done on time, with restricted overtime, and reduce manpower to reduce payroll expenses? Bold move. At my company, they've been pushing to reduce operating expenses by going after the overtime and also restricting hiring. They've also been pushing more heavily for automation, such as arbitrarily increasing the number of stations an employee has to monitor from 2 to 4 to 3 to 5, and then telling the production lines to figure out how to further automate stuff. Generally, almost everyone is paid by the hour, including engineers and lower-level managers. It's not until you get to around department head level that you get switched over to the salary side. Paying holidays, overtime for an engineer is expensive. Hiring another engineer is also expensive. Letting maintenance fall behind and having delays in troubleshooting problems from insufficient manpower is even more expensive. Kneecapping a design and allowing problems that could have been solved on paper or computer to spill over into the physical realm, where you have to tell contractors to rip out their work, and industrial controls programmers, who are quite expensive, to redo their codes? Genius. Anyways, I was on a project team that was responsible for overhauling a production line, which included significantly modifying or outright replacing a large portion of the stations on the line. We had built some separate prototype stations elsewhere to conduct some testing and concluded that we were going to need more engineers or hours to tackle some of the issues that already popped up. Project manager requested more engineers and time to complete the project. Her manager crushed that request. Our project manager was later chewed out for pushing us to take excessive overtime. The project manager claimed she was verbally instructed to make your team work more efficiently, not harder, and wasting company money can reflect poorly on your next annual review, or something along those lines. She told us to push forward with a strict 40 hours per week and disregard the problems, because obviously if her manager didn't want to invest in more resources, they would be satisfied with what they end up receiving. Fast forward a few months later, and the project entered the construction/installation phase, and it was turning into a dumpster fire with us having to tell the contractors to undo something or modify the designs on the fly. The project manager's manager managed to hire a few engineers that had recently graduated from college and tossed them into our project team, something that would have been much more helpful before the construction phase started. By the time the project was completed with half working stations and for the production engineers/technicians to figure out how to make the new production line work, we were over budget by nearly double and exceeded the project completion time by an equally large amount due to the constant rework. But hey, not an hour of overtime worked by a minimal-sized team. You can have it done cheap, fast, or right. Pick two. People don't seem to understand this in a profession. Want it cheap and fast? It's going to be crappy. Fast and right? You'll pay out the butt. Cheap and right? Expect it to take ages to complete. And our last story. My driveway is messy. Yours will never be the same. And your walkway and your utilities and your foundation? We used to live in a newly upscale hill community. Apparently, old hippies get possessive when they find that their hillside shack is suddenly worth 20 times what they paid. It was usually enough to fund a comfortable retirement through reverse mortgages and the like. From the first day we moved in, our older downslope neighbor was really pissy about the state of our walkways. Get that resurfaced. Those cracks are going to erode and shower dirt down onto my driveway. And put in a proper concrete walkway, not those cheap paving stones. I tried to be polite, but he was just full of orders on how we should make his life better/easier/prettier. His comments about our taste, our lack of compliance, and other kids these days rants weren't ever about his own place, only criticizing ours. It was unending. Too many plants, too many invasive plants, too many poisonous plants. Somehow they were all poisonous. Too much mulch, too many repairs, too much new paint. What good will swallowing the yard do? Not enough expensive concrete. Not enough herbicides, pesticides, whatever nasty sprays he likes to kill things with. The space between our property and his was our paving stone walkway on dirt, a 2-inch wood retaining wall, and then his poured walkway. His yard was mowed, sprayed, and beaten into concession, All bare dirt, nothing planted to hold soil. It had been so long since his soil was protected that there were visible erosion runnels. No wonder he was worried about erosion. He was building new rivers across his property. In a few years, he'd escalated to threatening to call the authorities on us. We had code enforcement out twice in a month for wasting water until they refused to make any more special trips. He kept calling different city departments to check up on our plans or report us for anything possible. Twice we got permits for small repairs. He called every day to try to get us in trouble. He even lied about an unpermitted pool to the authorities, who got there and just sighed, toured the unexcavated backyard yet again, and left. He was always yelling about something out a window every time he saw us. It got so bad that I had to sneak out to garden. So when the market got markedly better, we put the house on the market. It sold just at the beginning of our rainy season. 2 days before we moved, I left him 2 going-away presents. I bought dried blackberries and mixed them with birdseed. I then cast it across his backyard. For 2 days, blackberries will find a way to grow even in the worst, most oversprayed sterile soil. As birds eat, they poop. So in a few hours, the birds were depositing loads of blackberries and nutrient-rich guano everywhere on his property. Now, we had mulch down between established plants, so no new plants on our side, but awful neighbor quickly had a bramble patch. Some of those thorn canes can get bigger than your thumb and underground crowns bigger than your fist. Running bamboo will wedge into every crack available, buckling walkways and growing underground in surprising directions. It created a delightful privacy fence the new owners loved, and didn't bother our soil foundation or paving stones at all. When it popped up in his yard, it had spread 7 feet out into his territory and busted up every one of his walkways. I don't think his foundation was very solid. He was apparently complaining that he found bamboo growing inside his basement for years afterwards. I'm just glad I got the opportunity to help my neighbor with his erosion problem. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.